threshold for receiving sensory information. So if you have a low threshold, the sensory information comes in and it's maybe too much. So there's a big wide range of normal, right? So it's important not to get alarmed if if you see a friend that's their child is doing something that your child might not be doing quite yet. But I think parents generally have a very good gut feeling.
Right.
And so I would go with my gut, but not get too alarmed.
Yes.
So it's a little managing that.
Okay, so good afternoon, Linwood families. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited that you've been able to join today's episode, and we're very excited to have a special guest speaker that has worked with Linwood Unified for over 10 years in providing various occupational therapy services for our students. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself because I don't want to skip anything that she has done because she has such a resume, such experience. So I'm going to let her introduce herself. If you can please share with our viewers who you are.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here.
My name is Nakasuji, and as Dr. Martinez said, I'm an occupational therapist. I am the co-owner of a pediatric clinic called Therapy West. We have a clinic in West LA and in Gardena. And I've been fortunate enough to be a part of the Health Collaborative here at Linwood since 2014.
Yes.
And been working with some of the special ed students at different high schools and middle schools and elementary schools, but also with the Tier 3 students more recently. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And she's leaving a lot of things out. So she's a doctor in occupational therapy. So your experience?
Yeah, so I am adjunct faculty at both the University of Southern California and the Cal State Dominguez Hills occupational therapy programs.
So you train future
I do
therapists.
Train master level interns and also doctoral level residents.
Yes, and how many years have you been doing occupational therapy?
Oh, it'll show my age. It will be 50. It's over 50 years that I've been an OT.
Yes, which is very important because that shows the knowledge that you have that we can share with our families today, because I think occupational therapy is something that we don't really tap into a lot. We hear about it, but we don't really understand the deep, since I started working with you years ago, I started diving a little bit more. And I feel like it helps all students, have families understand the important milestones that kids need to reach, or anyone needs to reach to be successful.
Right.
So let's dive right in, if you're okay with that. But thank you for being here today.
Thank you for asking.
If you can please tell us a little bit of what occupational therapy is.
Yeah, so occupations in occupational therapy really means the things that we do, that we engage in, that are meaningful to us. Some of it is mundane, like brushing your teeth, right? And some of it is very exciting, like jumping out of an airplane if you're learning how to skydive, for example. But most of us are engaged in everyday occupations. There's grooming, there's driving to work, there's taking the bus to school, there's eating meals, there's social engagement with your friends and family, there's writing an assignment for class, playing on the playground. Those are all occupations. And so what occupational therapists do is to help children, if you're in pediatrics, to be able to best engage in the occupations that are meaningful to you, all of them. So when a child is struggling with, for example, handwriting, or socially with friends out in the playground, or having a hard time paying attention, having a hard time sitting still in a classroom, that is impacting their occupation in being a student, occupational therapy can be part of that intervention.
Wow. So if you're a parent and you have a baby or a toddler, what are some signs that you might look for, or what might trigger you to think like, oh, my child might need something more?
Yeah, I think parents have this innate sense about their children. And if there's anything that you feel that the child is doing that or not doing that you're concerned about, I would have it checked out. Things that might be lack of eye contact or excessive crying. What is that? Or they're not able to be consoled, or they're not meeting certain motor milestones that you would expect, rolling over or sitting. Ask your pediatrician. Sometimes pediatricians, because they don't have a lot of expertise in child development, they have some, but their skill is helping children stay healthy and not sick, right? Or how to take care of them when they get sick. So then there are other community resources out there, like Regional Center or a developmental pediatrician, for example, that you can go and see and check those things out.
So what are some things that you would say, and I know this is probably outside of what you would normally do, you're the occupational therapist, but if you see your child doing or not doing, like what? Like, I know you said rolling over.
Yeah. So
there's milestones children need to reach at some point.
There are infant milestones, and the pediatrician is going to be looking for those, or a nurse practitioner, for example. When you bring your child in for their well baby, they're going to be checking those milestones: language, motor, social. They're going to be checking all those milestones. So,
is there something a parent can do at home during that time to help their children reach milestones?
So I'm a little old school, as you could probably tell. But I think babies need to spend a lot of time on their tummies.
Oh.
When they get into what happens when you're on your tummy, you're doing a lot of upper body support, right? Your babies naturally start to push up. They really fight against gravity. It's so amazing. They sense gravity and they just want to master it. So they're pushing up against gravity all the time. So when you're on your tummy, you're pushing up with your hands, you're pushing up with your upper body, you're strengthening your arms and hands and your shoulder girdle. That's going to make a big difference with handwriting when you're in kindergarten and first grade.
Wow.
And one of the questions that I often ask a parent when I have a school-age child and they're in because their handwriting, for example, is not very good. The first thing I'll ask is, did they spend a lot of time on their tummy when they were babies? And a lot of times they'll say, well, no, they used to scoot on their bottoms, which is fine. They get around motorically. But if I were to say one thing, it would be to do tummy time.
Wow. And that's why she's here. Because something so minimal that we don't think as parents can do long-term impact on success.
Yeah.
Wow, tummy time. Do you see that because now a lot of even babies are using phones, like they're learning how to use their phone, so they use that less?
Yeah.
Have you seen an increase in the need for?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of research that's coming out, and I'm not an expert on that research, but there's research that's coming out about the dangers of too much screen time, and even babies know how to do
how
this.
To swipe.
Yeah.
Yes.
And especially when they get into school age. To sort of minimize that.
Wow.
I think the research is going to come out about the impact that has on learning and even attention. I sometimes worry about the fact that we're so used to getting things instantaneously on our phone. Even college students, You can look up research and you can just find stuff in 5 seconds on your phone.
Yes.
And there's less time that's engaged in processing and reflecting. There's so much learning that happens when you discover things on your own, when that revelation happens, not because you found it on your phone. So this quick information is really wonderful, but what we do with that information, I think we're missing sometimes. And now that we have AI, I'm worried about...
We had another episode on AI and everything behind that.
Yeah.
So
It's wonderful, and then there's the other side of that we have to be
Yeah.
careful about.
So there's a lot of things that get lost when we don't process, when we don't learn how to process.
I think there's a lot of learning that's missed, or a lot of learning that happens when we take the time to just sit and ruminate over information, or and then come up with our own revelations of things. That processing time. And sometimes we don't give ourselves enough of that.
We're always in a hurry.
Yeah.
We're trying to just do the next thing
Right.
and check things off. So
Right.
we don't realize sometimes how that affects our kids and their development.
And I would say also for families to have the children have some downtime, to do that, to just doing, even if they're just coloring or just, and not in front of a screen, but, being able to engage in, manipulatives, or maybe just even sitting and just thinking and processing
Like
how their
puzzles
day
or-
went.
yeah.
And then spending family time at meals. How did your day go?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. And to just spend some time modeling that too. I think as parents we need to try to model doing that as well.
How do we do it when we don't know how to do it? That's the magic question.
Yeah.
We're adults, but we're sometimes, it's harder. It's hard.
It is.
To change
It
our ways.
is.
But it's important, especially knowing how it affects our kids, our babies, our toddlers, and then eventually that becomes like the tummy time. That's such a small thing that if you have babies out there, it's so powerful to know how
I
that
think
could
so.
how that could affect
Yeah.
your child's future. So one of the words that I want you to talk about is sensory processing. We hear sensory processing, but sometimes it's like, what is that? What is sensory processing?
Okay, so the first thing is there are more than 5 senses. So we learn about 5 senses in school, right? Smelling, tasting, hearing, seeing, and touching. Okay? But there are 2 others that we don't learn about in health class that are very foundational to behavior and learning. And one is proprioception. So what's proprioception? The sensory information of proprioception comes through muscles and joints. So if you have your hand behind your back and you have your hand up or down, or your fingers, you know it. You don't have to see it to know it. You feel it because your muscles are doing something, or your joints are in a certain position that gives information to your brain. And by the way, you use your visual system, even though you're not seeing it, you are
Right.
visualizing
Yes.
what your body is doing
Yes.
in space, right? So that's proprioception.
Okay.
Then there's vestibular, and the vestibular system gives us information about movement, how we're moving, how fast we're moving, in what direction we're moving, and it also tells us where gravity is in relationship to our head, and that has to do a lot with helping us with balance,
Okay.
and staying upright. So the vestibular system, the proprioceptive system, and the tactile system are the foundational systems. And then the other systems are above that, higher in the brain. And then it keeps going to like the tactile system and the proprioceptive system, and even the olfactory system, smelling, when a baby is cuddled. And then what do? We naturally rock that baby. We're adding vestibular. That piles on to body awareness. And at the very top of that pyramid is behavior and learning, academic learning. So those three sensory systems is what occupational therapists often work with, because they know that's foundational to all of these other things.
Wow.
So sensory processing, you asked.
Yes.
So we take in that information, and we're all a little different, and we all take it in differently at different times of the day. So we fluctuate in how we receive that information. So, for example, some people are morning people and other people are not, right? We have a threshold for receiving sensory information. So if you have a low threshold, the sensory information comes in and it's maybe too much. Okay, I have to get out of here. Or maybe it's you have a whoa, what just happened? And so you become hypervigilant, maybe, or you're an avoider and I'm out of here. This is too much for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a low threshold, and all of us have a lower threshold during certain parts of the day. Don't talk to me at 4:00 in the morning, or at 4:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay, you also have a higher threshold. And those are the kids that the sensory information comes in and they may think, whoa, did something just happen? Maybe I want more of that. Okay. So typically, but not always, the kids with higher threshold are the kids that have maybe ADHD, where they're always wiggling, they're always doing something. They're always, can I go to the bathroom for the 14th time this morning, to get up and walk around and do stuff and move because their threshold's so high. Their bodies need more sensory input.
Sensory input.
And then the lower threshold, it's different. So you kind of get that picture. So processing that information first requires how you register the information, whether you have a low threshold or high threshold, and then how your brain processes all that information so that you know what to do next. Right? So when I get information from a teacher, for example, that their kids can't sit still, the danger is that, you have a kid that's constantly moving. The impression is that this kid is not paying attention. And so the natural thing to say is, stop that and pay attention, right? When there's a possibility that that kid is moving so that they can pay attention. So we need to appreciate the children's behaviors and look at them as the child is trying to tell me something. They may not be able to articulate it. They may not even be able to understand it themselves.
Right.
But it means something.
Yeah.
And it's our job to try and interpret what that means.
Wow. That's very interesting.
We're not always successful, but we do our best.
And that's good. That's knowledge as a parent, because I've been in that position where my kids could be moving and I'm like, relax.
Yeah.
And it's just probably their way to function, maybe? Would that be the word?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that it's always a sensory processing problem if they're wiggly, right?
Yeah.
But it is one of the things that we need to consider and not get them into trouble and not make the assumption that they're doing something they shouldn't be doing when they're doing that. But anyway, so what we do is we provide a lot of that foundational sensory input to help them.
How is that? How do you provide that? Or what does that look like?
Well, so one of the things that I tell parents, especially if you have a child that needs more muscle work, okay, a kid with high threshold, and actually kids with low threshold too, that proprioceptive work, is those are the kids that maybe their chores at home should be things like carrying the heavier groceries in, or pushing the garbage cans out to the alley, where they're having to use their muscles rather than setting the table.
Wow. So more physical.
More physical
chores
for them to do is one thing. And then after school activities can be things where they can, going to the park, jumping on a trampoline, riding their bicycles, things that will get them physically moving.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Instead of like little details.
Right.
That are,
unless they wanted, some kids like little crafty things. It helps them, relax.
Yeah.
I know I like to do little crafts. It helps me relax. So, some kids are sort of geared that way, and that's okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what's the common age where you think that, let's say, to identify if a student needs, or a child, I'll say child, needs more targeted services or support, instead of, how do I know if it's just part of the growing phases, or if it's something a little more serious?
Yeah, there's a big wide range of normal, right? So it's important not to get alarmed if if you see a friend their child is doing something that your child might not be doing quite yet. But I think parents generally have a very good gut feeling,
right?
And so I would go with my gut, but not get too alarmed.
Yes,
so it's a little managing that.
Yes, that's good. That's good to remind us not to get alarmed, because we seem to do that as parents a lot. Okay, so I have an important question for you. So one of the things that often comes to us here at the district office is homework time. I can't have my child sit. They don't seem to be able to sit for a long time. So I'm going to ask you a question. What are some simple sensory breaks or activities parents can incorporate at home to help with focus during homework time?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a challenging time. But I think being able to have you asked about sensory breaks. So one of the things that I need when I'm trying to concentrate and maybe have some low energy is having things that are crunchy to snack on. It could be chips, that's my favorite, but carrots are probably more healthy. But something that is crunchy, because the muscles of the jaw are pretty strong. Chewing gum, for example, is another one. But the other thing, too, is that if you break up the homework time into smaller pieces, maybe it could be something like work on it for 15 minutes and then let's take a little break. Maybe have a little snack and then come back and do another 15 minutes. Or it could be something like, can you do these 2 problems and then, take a break, and then do the next 2 problems and take a break. So there's different ways that you can organize that. The other thing that I would say is if you can include your child in coming up with a plan that they think might be that they would like to do, to work out when those breaks happen, or even if they need those breaks. I think including them in the problem solving is really important. It gives them an opportunity to participate, and then they're more invested. In, if I know, because I said I'm going to do these problems first, and then I get, a cookie or something.
Yes.
And the other thing is to look at the environment in which they're doing homework. Having the TV on is not a good idea, because it's always a conversation or something that is going to distract them from concentrating on what they need to be doing. Having music, however, in the background might facilitate their being able to relax and focus better. Of course, there's different kinds of music. And for some of us, like for me, I can't have music in the background. It's too distracting. So we're all made up a little different, but what works for you, right? And work that out with your student.
Yeah, and those are really important basic, tricks that we forget as parents because we're so busy just trying to
Yeah.
get to the next thing.
Yeah.
But we need to slow down.
Yeah.
We do need to slow down. And I know it's hard, but I think it's important not only for them, but for us as parents.
They're modeling you anyway. So if we can model.
Don't remind me of that, that they model us, but they do watch everything we do.
Yeah, they do.
And it's really important because we want our kids to be successful.
Of course.
And healthy and the processing. So let me ask you this question. How important are routines and schedules for our children?
They're very important. And it's not to say that there isn't going to be a change in routine. But routines basically create safety, a sense of safety, that a confidence that they can depend on. These things are going to happen in this order at this time. So routines are good, are important as much as possible. But when there are changes in the routine, which happen a lot, probably daily, having the child know ahead of time, this is what's going to happen, is going to help them be able to navigate that change better, right?
So communication also.
Oh, communication is really...
And I didn't ask you this earlier, and I wanted to, and I forgot, but you know how when we were talking about tummy time for the baby, how is communication important when they're babies? Like communicating with your baby?
You get on your tummy too, so that the two of you are having a moment, on your tummy, or you're playing together on your tummy. Communication is really key, and for kids, feeling that they're being heard doesn't mean they get everything they want. Doesn't mean that what they're saying is always right, but that you're actually paying attention to what they have to say. I think is really important. And communication between parent and child, of course, but also communication between everyone involved, a child and teacher, parent and teacher, that the child feels that everyone is invested in supporting them. Parents feel that they're invested by school staff. And that as a therapist, I know I make the best progress with the student I'm working with when I have a parent and we're working together. So communication and partnership is really key, which is why being a partner in the Health Collaborative
is very important.
It means so much to me and Therapy West.
And to us as well. So thank you for being part of the collaborative, for helping our students, for training us, training staff with being aware, training our parents, and just different awareness is key, which is the purpose of this podcast for whoever is not able to make it to our school sites, or we can make it aware to more people. Occupational therapy, we don't hear much of it, but it's a very powerful tool that exists that's similar to, honestly, mental health therapy.
Yes.
It sounds like there's a lot of connections.
Absolutely.
To a student's and a person's well-being.
Yes.
So are there any resources or any online resources that you would recommend to parents? Because we can add it to the end of this page so parents can access if they want to learn more about occupational therapy.
Well, the school district has an occupational therapy department here. Yes. Reginald Cerdenio is the head of the occupational therapy department here at Linwood.
Yes.
And so that might be the first call. Okay. Or to just have a conversation with the teacher saying, do you think my child could the OT kind of come and take a look?
Yeah.
Yes.
Our OT department might not be happy. They're going to get a million phone calls.
But there's OTs out in the community.
Yeah.
There is a state program called Regional Center.
Okay.
Your medical facilities probably have OTs on staff. But communicating and letting those know what your concerns are, and getting support as much as you can is key. Is key.
Yes.
That's key.
So we tell all the parents that are watching today that if you need any type of health care and are not receiving it or do not have access to it, we have a collaborative here
Yes.
where we can refer you to a lot of our agencies that are nearby. We have mental health agencies, we have healthcare agencies. So we don't want you not to receive the treatment that you or your child might need. So please reach out. Again, we always talk about this in every podcast. There's community school case managers, there's licensed clinical social workers, there's SEL specialists, there's counselors, there's health techs at every single school. So there's resources out there where if you're not sure, just ask. Ask, go to your school site and ask whatever it is that you might need, and we'll connect you to the appropriate person. But thank you for being here today. There's so much more that we can talk about, but the time that you did give us, we appreciate those tips. As parents, we always appreciate, sometimes we forget basic things that we need to do that go a long way for our child's well-being. So thank you, Bonnie, for joining us. And thank you, everybody.
For including me.
Yeah, so thank you for being here today. And we look forward to you logging in next week for next week's podcast. So thank you again.
Bye.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah.
That was really good.